end of an empire. Neon bled across the broken skyline like a memory refusing to die. The city was silent in its decay, but in the upper tiers of the shattered megacorporation tower, the hum of dying servers whispered of a world that had once been whole. Once, this place had ruled everything: networks, markets, and mines. Now it teetered on the edge of oblivion, its last executives trapped in glass offices, while the world outside crumbled in the shadow of the Great Shutdown. Cassian moved through the debris-strewn corridors, boots echoing hollowly against cracked tiles. His eyes adjusted to the flickering red lights that had replaced the steady white of the power grids. He was alone, at least for now, though he could feel the city's pulse around him. The faint vibrations of generators clinging desperately to life, the occasional stir of scavengers beyond reinforced walls. Survival had become a fragile game of observation and timing. In the control room, the screens displayed fractured code and incomplete data streams. The executives had tried to maintain order, but with the central AI collapsed, even the most loyal systems had become unrecognizable ghosts of their former function. Every holographic interface that blinked to life seemed almost like a mockery, a simulacrum of control, meaningless and ephemeral. Cassian knew that one wrong keystroke could set off a chain reaction. Fire alarms, structural locks, even automated defenses still keyed to protect a corporation that no longer existed. He remembered the days when orders were given and obeyed without hesitation, when a single executive's decision could ripple through entire sectors. Now, the rules were gone. Hierarchies had dissolved. The empire had turned inward, consuming itself in desperation. And yet, the human will to cling to authority lingered stubbornly, like dust that refused to settle. Cassian reached the executive suite on the 78th floor, its glass walls fractured, but holding. Inside, the last corporate council huddled around a terminal that barely functioned. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, reflecting neon streaks that reminded him of fading stars. Cassian, the tallest one, said, voice brittle but commanding, "You've come far. You know what must be done." He nodded, though the weight of the moment pressed down like the gravity of a world about to collapse. The choice was not between right or wrong, but survival or annihilation. The empire had built its wealth on control over memory, information, and obedience. Now, those tools were useless. The final decision would not be strategic, it would be existential. The terminal flickered, and a cascade of corrupted files scrolled across the screen. Plans, assets, records of lives and deaths, all tangled in indecipherable code. One keystroke could erase the remnants of the corporation forever, or preserve them, shackling the future to the past. Cassian's hand hovered over the panel. Outside, the city groaned. A structural column gave way in the lower sectors, sending a wave of dust and sparks upward. It was a reminder. The world was moving on, indifferent to the struggles of men clinging to vanished power. Cassian thought of the employees who had once worshipped the empire, who had lived by its protocols and now wandered aimlessly through ruined streets. He thought of the neighborhoods crushed under the weight of overreaching skyscrapers, of the memories that had been stolen, sold, or corrupted. The empire had promised eternity, but eternity had never been theirs to claim. He pressed a finger against the touchscreen. A confirmation prompt appeared, asking for authorization. The text glitched, fragments of code bleeding into English words that made no sense together. The choice, Cassian realized, had never truly been his. It belonged to the ghosts of the empire, to the collective weight of memory and ambition that had defined the world for decades. A siren wailed somewhere below, echoing through the empty hallways. The remaining council flinched, as if expecting salvation from a world that had already decided to abandon them. Cassian felt a strange detachment, a clarity sharpened by the inevitability of consequences. Whether he pressed the final command or not, the empire's decay had already begun. The real question was whether it would end quietly or with a roar that would reach the streets beyond. He took a breath and let it out slowly, thinking of nothing and everything at once. The empire had been a machine of ambition, and now its gears ground to dust. Outside the walls, scavengers climbed over broken barricades, Children laughed in alleys carved from fallen concrete, and the neon sky reflected off puddles that smelled faintly of ozone and decay. Life had a way of seeping in, even where the grandest illusions of permanence had fallen. Cassian's fingers trembled slightly over the final command. He realized, with a grim understanding, that the Empire's end was not a single event, but a process, a slow unwinding that would echo for years. Every decision he made, every inaction he allowed, would ripple outward, shaping the memory of the city for those who survived, those who would inherit its ruins. And in that moment, standing in the hollow heart of a world that once thought itself immortal, he understood something profound. The end of an empire was not about power lost, but about freedom gained. Not just for him, but for all who had been caught in the machinery of its ambition. The screen flickered one last time, as if urging him forward, demanding a choice that was both meaningless and crucial. Cassian's eyes met the council's, and in the reflection of shattered glass, he saw not fear, but the weight of inevitability. Outside, the city waited indifferent. The Empire's ghosts lingered, trapped in circuits and memory, watching as the world moved toward its next form. Cassian lifted a hand, poised between erasure and preservation, aware that whatever followed would not be final. Not yet. And then the terminal died. A soft hiss, the last sigh of a system gasping for relevance. The council froze, disbelief etched into every taut line of their faces. Cassian stared at the blank screen, the hum of the servers fading into silence, leaving only the distant echo of the city beyond. For a moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed, and yet everything seemed poised to collapse simultaneously. He realized that the decision had been made for him, not by his hand, but by entropy, by the decay that had been gnawing at the Empire from the inside. The choice to act had been stripped away. He could no longer erase, preserve, or manipulate. All that remained was the quiet acknowledgement of inevitability. Outside the tower, the city shifted in rhythm with its own decay. Neon lines fractured like broken synapses, shadows twisted and expanded, and puddles of rain reflected an uncertain sky. Cassian felt the pulse of life, fragile, insistent, rising from the rubble. It was neither triumphant nor mournful, simply present. He turned to the council. Their expressions were mirrors of a past that no longer existed. Fear, anger, denial, and a trace of hope clinging stubbornly. Cassian had once revered the discipline of corporate order. Now he understood it as a cage. And in that cage, they had all been playing a game that had no winner. "Enough," he said, his voice echoing in the hollow space. "It's over." The tallest council member blinked. "Over? How?" "The assets, our data, our control." Cassian shook his head. "The control never existed." "Not really. All that remains are memories and echoes. And even they will fade." A low murmur of unease ran through the remaining executives. Some turned to leave, unsure where to go, unprepared to face a world that no longer followed rules. Others simply sank into chairs, staring blankly at the walls, listening to the whisper of machinery that would soon be nothing. He walked toward the window. From this height, the city stretched endlessly, a network of destruction and survival intertwined. The distant towers of rival corporations lay in skeletal ruin. Bridges sagged like tired bones over dried canals, and below, streets were littered with the remnants of those who had clung to orders that no longer mattered. Cassian's thoughts drifted to the people who had lived within the Empire's shadow, the workers, the scavengers, the children who had never known a life beyond its neon glow. Their lives, once tightly controlled by protocols and hierarchy, were suddenly unshackled. The consequences of this liberation were unknown, terrifying, and yet strangely beautiful in their openness. He remembered the rumors of rebellion, whispers of new settlements beyond the towers, communities forming from the debris, governed not by command but by necessity and trust. Perhaps the Empire's end would not be remembered as a catastrophe, but as the first breath of something new, something human. Cassian knelt beside a console, its screen cracked and black. He traced a finger over the dust, leaving a faint impression, a mark that might be mistaken for vandalism, or perhaps a small act of testament. He did not know if anyone would see it or if it mattered. All he knew was that history was no longer his to control. It was unfolding, chaotic, and irrevocable. From somewhere deep within the tower came a metallic groan. Floors shifted, supports failing silently. The structure itself seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging its own mortality. Cassian felt it beneath his boots, a subtle vibration that resonated with the quiet rhythm of the city outside. He thought about the countless decisions made in these halls, choices that had shaped millions of lives, now reduced to memory fragments, whispers in abandoned servers, and the lingering fear of those who had survived. The Empire had promised permanence, but permanence had been an illusion, a line coded into every protocol, every law, every ledger. A faint light flickered on the horizon. Not neon, not electrical, but the subtle glow of dawn, or maybe dusk, he could not tell. It was a light that existed independent of human ambition, indifferent to the games of power. Cassian realized that the world beyond the Empire was waiting, patient, neither forgiving nor cruel. It simply was. He rose and faced the council once more. "You can leave," he said, "or stay. The choice is yours. The consequences are yours. But know this, the Empire is gone. Only the world remains." Some shuffled toward the elevators, hesitant and unsure. Others remained, staring at walls that no longer defined anything. Cassian watched them, aware that even in freedom, uncertainty carried weight. The Empire's shadows would linger, etched into memory, shaping those who survived in subtle, untraceable ways. He stepped back from the window and moved toward the door. The corridors ahead were dark, uncertain. The building could collapse at any moment, or it could endure long enough to become another ruin, catalogued by scavengers, noted by historians who might never exist. He did not care. The mechanics of survival had changed. Now they were defined by instinct, improvisation, and the fragile persistence of life itself. Cassian paused at the threshold, listening. No alarms, no commands, only silence and the distant, faint hum of a city still breathing. The Empire had ended, and with it, the illusion of control. Ahead lay a world that had been waiting quietly for this moment, indifferent, ready to be claimed or rejected by those brave enough to step into it. He exhaled, feeling the weight of inevitability settle into his bones. Outside, the first faint stirrings of life beyond the ruins hinted at possibilities that had long been denied. Choices remained, but they were no longer dictated by fear of consequence. The end had arrived, and with it the raw, terrifying, beautiful potential of what came next. Cassian stepped forward. The door creaked behind him. The neon city waited, patient, indifferent, eternal in its impermanence. Cassian emerged into the city, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked concrete and scorched metal. Shadows of crumbling towers stretched across cracked streets, refracting neon into broken patterns that danced like restless spirits. For the first time in decades, the world felt unclaimed, unshaped by corporate will or digital dominion. It was raw, vulnerable, beautiful in its uncertainty. He walked slowly, boots scraping debris, ears attuned to the faintest hum of life. Somewhere a scavenger laughed. A child's cry echoed from a collapsed courtyard. A dog barked in the distance. The Empire's remnants lay scattered around him. Shards of glass, twisted steel, discarded servers, still whispering fragmented code. Yet even here, life persisted, creeping through fractures like green shoots in ash. Cassian's mind wandered to the council he had left behind. Some had fled, seeking refuge in lower sectors, unsure of what to do with freedom. Others had stayed, paralyzed by the collapse of all they once relied upon. He did not pity them. He understood their fear, but he also knew that fear had been the Empire's true chain, stronger than walls or data streams. Now the chain was broken. A faint wind stirred the streets, carrying dust and distant echoes of voices, memories embedded in the city itself. He thought of the countless lives that had been molded, monitored, and manipulated within these towers, lives catalogued, commodified, and often forgotten. The Empire had promised immortality through control, but all that remained was impermanence. He felt a strange kinship with the city, both of them survivors, both of them remnants of something grand that had no future. Cassian paused at an intersection, where the streets formed a lattice of ruin. Neon signs flickered weakly, advertising services that no longer existed, promises that had turned to ash. Here, the Empire's illusion of order was clearest. A city designed for obedience, now a maze for the living. And yet, in the chaos, he saw potential. A chance for life to assert itself without hierarchy, without algorithmic dominance, without fear dictating every step. He walked on, past collapsed overpasses and scorched plazas. Patches of greenery had begun to reclaim cracks in the asphalt, faint evidence that even in decay, the world would continue. Cassian wondered if someone someday would look at these ruins and see the beauty of imperfection, the artistry of entropy shaping a new civilization. In the distance, a faint glow rose from what had once been the corporate headquarters of a rival faction. Smoke curled into the sky, but Cassian saw no threat in it, only the inevitable transformation of structures that had outlived their purpose. The city itself was becoming a record, a living archive of human ambition and hubris. He realized that the Empire's memory, though fractured, would persist in scattered fragments, in walls, in street patterns, in those brave enough to navigate the ruins. He reached the edge of a collapsed plaza and crouched beside a pool of rainwater, reflecting the fractured skyline. The reflection shimmered, blending reality with illusion. Cassian felt the weight of countless decisions pressing against him. Lives saved, lives lost, moments of mercy and cruelty now indistinguishable from one another. The Empire's legacy was not a monument of power, but a mosaic of consequence. A sound drew his attention, a faint mechanical whir, almost imperceptible. He followed it, stepping carefully across the broken streets. Beneath a half-collapsed archway, he discovered a small device, blinking weakly, its purpose unclear. Perhaps it was a remnant of automated security, perhaps an artifact of some unfinished experiment. He did not touch it. Some remnants of the Empire were better left to linger, unsolved, enigmatic. Cassian looked up at the skyline, where neon fractures painted jagged patterns across clouds heavy with rain. The towers leaned precariously, some already hollow, others teetering like exhausted sentinels. And yet, amidst the decay, movement persisted. A lone figure crossing a bridge, a group of survivors scavenging near an overturned vehicle, smoke curling from a makeshift fire in the distance. Life, stubborn and irreducible, continued to carve space from the ruins. He realized that the Empire had ended not with a bang, not with dramatic collapse, but with a whisper, a surrender to the inevitability of entropy, to the resilience of life that refuses to be entirely controlled. The choice he had faced in the upper floors, the keystroke, the authority, had been symbolic. The real end had already begun beyond walls and screens, in streets, in hearts, in the small, unrecorded acts of survival. Cassian's shadow stretched long across broken tiles as he moved forward. The city around him was alive with fragments, voices, memories, neon reflections, and the quiet rhythm of rain. Each step felt like a promise, a defiance, and a question. What would emerge from the rubble? What stories would be told, and which would vanish, unrecorded, into the silence? He paused one last time, glancing back at the towers that had once symbolized supremacy. Their lights flickered, some fading forever, others stubbornly blinking as if uncertain whether to die or endure. Cassian inhaled the damp air, tasting possibility and decay alike. The Empire was gone, yet its shadow lingered, not as a threat, but as a reminder that power is temporary, and the world, patient and indifferent, will always endure. With that thought, he stepped into the streets, moving toward the uncharted horizon. Every footfall echoed through the ruins like a heartbeat, marking the fragile, persistent pulse of life. The city watched him go, silent, waiting. And somewhere beyond the neon and rubble, beyond the fractured towers and broken streets, the first stirrings of what would come next began to take shape. The Empire had ended. The world remained,